Hey, travel fam, it's Darian, and welcome back to I Need Travel Therapy. Today, we've got a great show lined up for you. But before we talk about that, I want to remind you guys to check out our episodes on YouTube. If you look up I Need Travel Therapy, we have all of our episodes, the video portions being recorded and put up on there, as well as lots of other fun clips for you guys to check out. So please check us out and subscribe there. Today, we're going to be talking to Eric Habibi, though, who is fantastic. He's going to be telling us about his experiences working in Alaska, what travel's really done for his lifestyle change, and also his home health experience and how he got into that and how he thinks it's a really important setting. So a little bit about Eric. He is Canadian born, but grew up in Texas. He's currently on assignment in Anchorage, Alaska, and has been working as a traveler for three years. He loves hiking, anything outdoors, and making music. Hey, Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, how are you?
So good. So glad to have you on. I've been following you on Instagram for a while, so I'm very excited to hear some of your stories.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Instagram makes everything look cooler, so.
Right? Well, it looks pretty cool, so check them out. So just to start off, can you tell us a little bit how you got started with travel therapy and on this journey?
Yeah. So for me, I graduated PT school. I moved back to my hometown. I found a perm job, a great job at an inpatient neuro facility that I loved. But I kind of felt like I was doing the same thing over and over and over, especially being back in your hometown. I feel like it's really easy to default to like who you were before you left, especially being around all your old friends. And I really kind of felt stagnant. You know, I was 27 at the time, and to me, it just kind of seemed like, you know, you're back here, you're comfortable. So is this it? Or where else do you kind of go from here? And the day that I applied for my license to practice in Alaska, it was kind of like a really spur of the moment type thing. I just, I'd gone out with a bunch of people the night before, and I just woke up with a severe headache, and I was just like, you know what, I feel like I'm just kind of stuck in the same routine over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, you know, what's probably the craziest thing I could do, or what's the thing that I could do to challenge myself the most, or to kind of put myself in an unfamiliar situation and really put myself in a position to do something new. And the thought just came to me. I was like, you know what? Alaska seems pretty cool. Like, I think that is different than Texas. That day, I got the process started on applying for my license to practice in Alaska, and the rest is history. So
that's amazing. I love Alaska. Alaska definitely has a piece of my heart. I'm going this summer actually in a couple of weeks.
You know, you hear about 24 hours of light and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then once you actually see what 24 hours of light is, you're like, wow, this is really cool.
There's so much daytime, so much time for activities.
A lot of time for activities. It's really, I mean, it's so beautiful, and it's, I think, one of the only places to in the country that's, there's still parts that are completely untouched. There's a lot of parts that just aren't accessible unless you have a boat or a plane. That's incredible.
Yeah.
I always kind of was set on Anchorage too. I knew I wanted at least some semblance of a big city, because coming from Houston, H-Town, we're used to it's a developed place. And, I knew I wanted someplace that had a lot going on. So it had to be Anchorage. But even in Anchorage too, you're 3 hours away from, in any direction from just seeing something incredible or beautiful that you wouldn't be able to see anywhere else in the world. So that's one of the things that I love about it most. It's everything's in your backyard, and it's a big backyard, so.
It is a big backyard. Yeah. It's the biggest backyard.
It really is, yeah.
Okay, so you applied for your Alaska license. Then did you immediately start doing travel therapy? Had you already started that process, or did you just start calling companies and you're like, hey, I'm going to Alaska?
So I had a friend who had been doing travel PT since we graduated. So I reached out to
Okay.
her, and I just kind of asked her about the process. And I didn't know how long applying for a license and getting a license in a state would take. So, for instance, Alaska, like I believe I want to say it was 8 to 12 weeks is typical for an Alaska license.
Yeah.
So I was kind of set on that, but to get my feet wet and to get started on the process of like understanding what it takes, I actually took an assignment in El Paso, Texas. So while I was waiting on my license and, for the dates to, we ended up pushing back the date on a job I applied for and to wait for my license to come in. And so while I was waiting on that, I got a call from a travel agency. I worked with two different ones at the time. And somebody gave me a call saying, hey, somebody in El Paso just tore their ACL. So we need a PT at the skilled nursing facility. So they offered me the job on Monday, and in Wednesday I was getting started at my first day.
No way.
Yeah. And that's man, Alaska's big, Texas is big. That was a 12-hour drive. Or I think closer to 13, 14 hours from Houston to El Paso. But, it was kind of cool. Like, it was my first exposure of, okay, this is what travel is. Like, you have to be really flexible. You have to be able to pack up all your stuff and get ready to hit the road. And then when you get to where you're going, you need to be able to kind of adjust to your environment really quickly, and in the workplace, kind of make it your own. So I think that experience really, really benefited me too, having El Paso before I got to Alaska, because I just kind of started to understand a little bit more about how it works.
Definitely. And El Paso is kind of a different world too, right? From Houston, it's much different.
But
I haven't been to El Paso, but everybody says that.
So the crazy thing is, I had been, I've been in places with mountains. So I mean, I've prior to getting into travel therapy, I mean, I've really seen a lot of the country since having done it. But the only exposure to mountains I ever had was Denver. And Denver really Denver, you have to drive an hour out to get to the Rockies or to get into the mountains. But El Paso, there's a giant mountain in the middle of the city that splits the east and the west side. So it was really my first exposure to an area like that, because it's way different than Houston. And, I think once I kind of saw what living in a city with mountains right in the middle of it was I was just yeah, this rules. Because, you ever need to find some peace and quiet, you just head on up to the mountains and you're hanging out. So
I had no idea there's mountains in El Paso. I had no idea.
I forget the name of the range, but I mean, and pretty much in every direction too. So when I say there's literally, this is gonna annoy me, but there's one right in closer towards the west side of the city, and it basically splits the east side and the west side of El Paso. And there's a road that drives up into the through the mountain, and so you can get off on that road, and there's different hikes you can do, and then just north of that in Las Cruces, New Mexico, there's mountains everywhere. So that drive is incredible. I loved El Paso. The only people I think that don't like El Paso are people from El Paso, and that's because they're ready to get out of that's because they're ready to get out of El Paso. But I loved it, and I thought it was beautiful, especially if you like menudo or pozole too. Great.
Okay, so you went from Houston to El Paso, and then you were like, it's go time. We're going to Alaska. So what was that like going from Texas, which is very hot, to Alaska, which is not so hot? And what time of year was it?
When I went up to Alaska, it was July 22nd, 2018. So it was very hot in Texas, in Houston.
Okay.
The whole idea behind me going to Alaska in the first place was, not only a change of scenery in every single way. So along with that too is like a lifestyle change. You know, like the biggest thing for me being in Houston and kind of being around like all my old friends and the old scene that I was in, like you know, Houston's really big on like bars, downtown, super clubby, and I really kind of wanted to get away from that. So you know, not only did I have like a big change in the climate, but I to this day I remember the first weekend in Alaska, Friday night. I was sitting around a campfire at like 11 p.m., like sipping a beer with two people I had just met. And I was like, man, this is so different than a Friday night I would have in Houston. Like, we're literally just hanging out outside. Yeah.
Was it still light out?
Yep. So,
yeah.
And that was the other thing too. So, around July in Anchorage, it's still, you know, I think the sun starts going down like, you know, late July, probably around 11:30. So that's when it starts getting dark. So just seeing that was, I mean, it was amazing, you know, because it was 11:30, still light out. You know, I was Snapchatting everything, like just freaking out the entire time. I just thought it was the coolest thing. And it was like, even coming from Texas, I believe that first week I was here, like, I want to say the weather was something like in the 60s, and I immediately felt cold. Like the second I got off the plane, I was just like, whoa, like this is chilly. Yeah. So definitely different, like in every single way. I mean, you know, lifestyle, what you do on weekends in Alaska compared to Texas, weather, and even the change in light, you know, so really just kind of like a whole 180 from everything, which is, you know, kind of exactly what I was looking for. So
for sure. And did you drive or fly?
I flew.
I'm assuming you flew. Okay, because Texas is a really long way.
Whenever I leave out of Alaska this time, I'm planning on making the drive down, just because I've heard driving down the Alcan is really, really beautiful. But yeah, it's a long drive. I actually put it right into Apple Maps. It's I think 3,232 miles from my parents' house, my family's house in Houston to where I'm at in Alaska. So the first time flying, this time around, you know, I might be more comfortable with driving.
Cool. Okay. And then you said there's a lot of changes like weather-wise and things that you do. Did you feel like a big cultural difference going to Alaska?
Absolutely. I think people in Alaska just, you know, what people do is just totally different. It's really kind of in its own bubble. And that's what the same thing that makes like being here difficult is also what makes it amazing. Like it's very separated from a lot of things down in, we call it the lower 48. But it's very separated from. I do.
You say that now too.
All the lingo, like completely. I've totally adapted it. Yeah, it's part of my regular vocabulary. I mean, so that was the thing. Like, you know, El Paso or Houston, just Texas in general. You know, Friday, Saturday, what do? Like, you go out. Like, you're probably at a bar. Out downtown, at a restaurant, something like that. And here, you know, it's just like, I mean, last weekend I was at like the top of a mountain, like overlooking a lake. You know, it's just on the weekends, people here, they just do something completely different, you know, and don't get me wrong, like Anchorage still has a nightlife scene, but it's nothing like being from a big city or anything like that. So, culturally, I think even, like what people do and even how people kind of are, you know, it's, I think most people here, are so far from where they originally came from, or they're all kind of displaced, or everyone, knows that it's hard to be out here. So I feel like everybody, like you find your people, you find your tribe and you stick with them, and everyone's really warm and welcoming, and you know everyone's really there for you. And I think that's kind of outside of you'll see it more here than you will in the 48. Like people just understand that being out here is difficult. So I think culturally, like everybody's a lot more inclined to just kind of take you in, or if they know that you're new, they'll probably extend a hand out more than they would in the lower 48, because there's not as many people here and people realize that it's more difficult being here.
Definitely. Okay. And then would you say that like as soon as you made the transition, you were like, okay, this is great. Like I'm ready for this. Or was it kind of a transition for yourself too? Because going from like full bars to being like night campfires, like it sounds like a beautiful thing, but it would be challenging if you're loving that other life, right? Was that hard?
It definitely took some time, and the whole point of it was I wanted to kind of find myself a little bit more outside of that. Like, I just feel like me being in that scene, or like, going out as much as I did, I almost felt like it kind of was on autopilot. Like I did it without really thinking about it. And it's just what I got used to. So switching gears and like, being outdoors, or like camping on the weekends, or just being in nature, kind of disconnected from everything. It was definitely an adjustment, and one that I felt like I kind of needed to make in order to just be able to exist like outside of what I already had known. But definitely difficult. I think when I first got here too, like, I got super lucky. I met some great people like really, really early on from the get-go. And like, it was just a really, really, really lucky thing that happened. So I had people to kind of show me around and take me in. But that being said, like, it's pretty lonely, because it's a tough thing. Like you're going from, all my family and my friends are in Texas. Like that's the only state I had really lived in, with the exception of doing one clinical in Niagara Falls in PT school. So that adjustment, that transition, it's like a difficult thing to do. But that being said, like I got very lucky with some great people that kind of took me under their wing. But yeah, it's an adjustment for sure.
So, okay. So you went there. Did you originally go for 13 weeks, or have you been there since? Have you been there since July? Oh, okay.
So my trajectory was El Paso, Anchorage, Arizona, back to Anchorage.
Okay.
And the original contract that I took was 8 months. So it was from July to I want to say like the end of mid-April, somewhere around there. Okay. And once that ended, they offered for me to extend. So I stayed for another 4 months to make it to a year. And then I ended up staying for like 2 months, just exploring, But yeah, so 8 months, and I left, and funny enough, like I left and went to Arizona, and I was in Arizona whenever COVID happened. So like, kind of in the full swing of COVID, I was in Arizona at the time. And, when I left Alaska, I really didn't think I would miss it that much. And when I did, like, I first realized it when I got to Arizona, and then I was in like a crowd for the first time. And I was like, why are there people around me? Like, this is so weird. Like, why don't I have a bunch of space? Like, why don't I have a bunch of open land? This is so strange. So, it's, I feel like that happens. I know plenty of people that, they've done multiple contracts in Alaska, because it's just, like, it's a very unique place. And, I think it's one of those things that you don't realize how much you're going to miss it until, like, you leave and you see like all the things that are unique about it. So.
Cool. All right. Well, do you see yourself living there long term? Maybe forever?
You know what? Both of my clinic directors, my bosses that I've had, they ask me the same question. All sure. Commonly. Yep. They ask me that a lot. That's really that's tough. The short answer is, if I could make this a summer home, or if I could have a job
Yeah.
that allowed me to just be here in the summer. We get 24 hours of light for like 3 weeks in Anchorage.
Yeah.
But the farther north you go, the more light you have for longer, basically. That's how it's determined. And same thing with the darkness in the winter.
Yeah.
And so, if I could just take the best parts of the state, or the
Yeah.
easiest parts of the state that like I enjoy the most, then, I would consider that. But the short answer, long term, living for like a permanent situation, not going anywhere else, probably not, just because, I'm very, very, very far from my family. It's a 12-hour trip to get to Texas. Like, to get to Houston, it's like, it'll take half a day. So I think just the difficulty behind that. And then,
Yeah.
the winters here are rough. Like, that's
Yeah.
just, I have a couple of people that are like, oh, winter's not that bad. Like, winter's okay. And I'm just like, nah,
Yeah.
like, it's
Yeah.
tough. That darkness makes you really groggy.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm from Minnesota and winters are tough here. So I can't imagine having like the coldness with more darkness, right? But
I think where in Minnesota are you from?
like the cities area.
Okay, gotcha. So
I did live in Fargo, North Dakota for 5 years though, and that is like, I think maybe colder than parts of Alaska. It's ridiculous.
So the first year I was up here, it was actually colder. This was the year that Minnesota got crazy weather. It was actually colder in Minnesota than it was in some parts of Alaska in 2018, 2019. But it's really like honestly, the cold is bearable. What really is tough is, man, I don't know if this number is exact, but what I've heard is in the wintertime, you're losing about 1.5 to 3 minutes of sunlight a day. And then in the summer, or like in the spring, you're gaining about 1.5 to 3 minutes of sunlight. And basically, like, the two time periods are winter solstice and summer solstice. So when it's fall and you start losing 1.5 to 3 minutes of sunlight a day, all the way up to winter solstice, and then after you start gaining, just that experience and seeing that every day, like, you're losing daylight, that's probably the most difficult thing, because all of a sudden October rolls around and it's 10 a.m. And when I say it's pitch black, like, it's pitch black, like, it's completely dark at 10 a.m. and then it's dark at 4. I think the year I was up here in the swing of it in winter solstice, it was the sun came out that day, I think at 10:45 a.m. and it went down at 3:15 p.m. So the cold I don't mind, but the darkness is like, that's challenging,
Sounds like an experience. So something else I wanted to ask you about. So we saw something about you were in an earthquake, or there was a situation going on with that. So we love Alaska. I don't want this to come off wrong. I know it happens in Alaska, but I want to hear about it.
I'm just going to give everybody a disclaimer. I mean, I came, it couldn't have been that bad because I came back. So if I really had, don't let me like sway anybody from the talk about the darkness, talk about an earthquake, whatever. I came back here, so I must have come back for a reason. So I did not know prior to coming here that Alaska experiences a lot of earthquakes. Alaska is located on the Ring of Fire. So we get, I think, the number is something in the ballpark of upwards of 40,000 earthquakes a year. I think it's like 44,000. The thing is, like, probably like 3/4 of those are so small. They're like 1 or 2 on the Richter scale. So they're not able to be perceived by people. And then you also factor in the size of Alaska. Alaska is 2.7 times the size of Texas. So a lot of it is uninhabited. So these earthquakes wouldn't even be felt by like anybody anyways. So that being said, like, I did not know that earthquakes were a thing here. And so I also, the day that happened too, I had somebody visiting me from Seattle, and
Oh no.
she had actually just told me, like, we were talking the night before, and she told me that her biggest fear is, I swear to God, her biggest fear is being trapped in an earthquake. Like that's what she had said. And so
Yeah.
so I wake up at 8:27, and like I just I knew something was off. Like I cannot
Yeah.
even describe, like, I know that sounds so weird, but I just woke up at 8:27 and I was like, something doesn't feel right. Like and at 8:29 all of a sudden you just hear like a quick rumbling, and that rumbling over the course of the next 10 seconds turns into like a deafening roar, and all of a
Wow.
sudden everything in the like in my room is just moving like 8 to 10 inches in either direction, and like things are flying off of the shelves. And she's up and she's like screaming and freaking out and panicking, and like I have no idea what's going on. So immediately I hopped up and I started packing a suitcase, and like because I didn't know what was going on. So I hopped up, I started packing a suitcase, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And she's like screaming, "What's going on?" And I was like, I had like a pair of briefs in my hand and the suitcase right here, and I'm like throwing stuff in there, and I'm like, I don't know, like I gotta get out of here. And like I'm like, "Hey, get your stuff, like let's go." And
Yeah.
so 30 or 40 seconds into it, like I distinctly remember this. I remember looking up at the roof, and I thought to myself, like, there's no way that if this continues, like this roof is not coming down. Like
Wow.
this roof is about to come down. Like there's no way that that's not going to happen. And the second that I had that thought, everything stopped. Everything stops, and I'm like, we're both kind of looking at each other like, what happened? My first,
Yeah.
seriously, my first impression was that like Anchorage for some weird reason was getting bombed. That's like what it was
Wow.
that intense. Like when I say everything was
Wow.
shaking, like it was the loudest thing I've ever heard.
Wow.
It was wild. And so like a minute later, since Anchorage is on the Cook Inlet, like there's a body of water on the
Yeah.
on the west side of Anchorage, we get that little notification, like the disaster alert on our phone, saying that there's a tsunami warning that's been issued for Anchorage, and everybody gets to high ground.
Oh my gosh.
So now I'm looking
Wow.
at that suitcase and I'm like, I'm a genius. Like I,
Yeah.
yeah, like everybody making fun of me for pack.
Any more
Exactly. Yeah. Like,
questions? Yeah.
and so like I remember calling my boss, and they ended up saying like that tsunami warning, I guess, is something that's issued if there's an earthquake, but it's by a body of water. But that ended up being like
Okay.
a non-issue, and I think they said that over the radio shortly after. Like this is all in the span of 5 minutes. So they like I
Wow.
think right after that got issued, like on the radio, they said, "Hey, like there's not going to be a tsunami. Everyone's okay." And then literally 5 minutes after that first earthquake, we started getting another big rumble. And then like for 10-15 seconds, like everything's moving again. So at this point, I'm just like, hey, I'm done with the earthquakes, man. What's going on?
Yeah.
Like Ashton Kutcher's going to pop up from behind a tree and tell me like I just got punked, like this house is on, like I have no idea what's going on. So we had gotten like a pretty bad aftershock, and I just remember that day, like
Yeah.
Anchorage was completely shut down. One of there's a couple of like pretty, there's a couple of pretty iconic pictures from that day that stand out. There's one of like, there's a car here, and the road is completely like above it, so the car's like sunken in 10 feet.
Wow.
And then one of the highways like going out of Anchorage, like the only major one, is cleaved in half completely. So really, really, really nuts. But I remember thinking that day too, like it was really cool. Alaska just responded super well. Everybody was like everyone in Anchorage was just, it was really like everyone was all together checking up on each other, and kind of goes back to what I said about like, I feel like people in Alaska take care of their own because it's difficult to be out here. So everybody, it was great.
Yeah.
Like the city was really united, and we got back to normal like relatively quickly. But just a crazy thing to 0 of 10 would not recommend being in an earthquake. Like, I mean, I can say because nobody got seriously hurt during that earthquake that it was like an interesting thing or a cool thing to experience, but also pretty terrifying.
Yeah.
I've never really felt the ground move underneath me before like that. So
Yeah. So just to compare, it does, I think, I don't know why, but Alaska specifically and like Hawaii is like that too. So I lived in Hawaii for 6 months of the last year. And while I was there, I was in a couple of little earthquakes, but if you look, it's happening all the time. So if anyone's afraid of going to Alaska, you have to be afraid of going to Hawaii too.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, you wanted to shake things up, so it worked out.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was dropping earthquake puns for like a solid week.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Just earthquake puns left and right. But definitely, I mean, it's a part of it too. I mean, Hawaii, like where in Hawaii were you?
On the Big Island.
Okay, so I mean,
volcanoes on the other side. Volcanoes got
exactly.
lots of them, and then on the other side you can feel them sometimes. But
I think it was 2018 or 2018 that there wasn't it something like 5 miles of new beach was formed as a result of like one of the volcanoes erupting.
Yeah. It's crazy. So it's still erupting, but it's just interesting, these different places, the places away from the mainland, right? Lower 48 mainland.
Yeah.
Okay. So something else I really want to talk to you about is home health. I know this is like totally switching gears, but you have a lot of experience in home health. A lot of people want experience in home health, so we want to get some info on that. So have you always worked in home health, like right out of school, or what was it like getting into home health originally?
So coming out of school, I was in inpatient neuro, but I had heard, I think our exposure in school, I don't know how it is for nursing or other disciplines, but I know for PT, I think our exposure is really minimal. As a matter of fact, one of the, like a PT student I follow on Instagram, had a home health clinical, and I had never heard of that until like I saw that, and I thought that was really cool. But the transition into it, honestly, so the reason I got the job was just because like I was pretty set on going to Alaska, so I would probably have worked in whatever setting. But I saw the need for a home health job, and they were welcoming people with no experience and people that needed to be mentored. So the transition wasn't that bad at all. Because home health, essentially, at least from a PT perspective, you're focusing on a lot of the same things that you would do in acute care or in inpatient. So you're focusing on wheelchair mobility, stairs, gait, and transfers. However, you're just doing it in their environment. And so you have to kind of like, you can use the environment that they're in to facilitate either exercise or how they're going to move. The transition wasn't bad because I'd had experience in inpatient and acute care. So from a clinical and therapeutic side of things, like that's really, it's not that big of a jump. It's just you have to kind of switch gears and shift your thinking. I think in home health, the more challenging thing is, you have to be really organized, which I'm not the most organized person in the world, but it kind of helped, sharpen that up a little bit. Because basically, like, you're communicating with physicians, you're putting in orders to the physicians to request like a certain block of therapy, and you're also sending that to the insurance companies. you have to call and schedule patients. You have to keep track of your mileage. You have to structure your day appropriately. So for instance, like I can be more efficient with my time if I have, 3 patients on the same side of town back to back to back. It's eliminating my need to kind of drive all over the place. So you have to be able to like kind of plan ahead. So I think the challenge in home health is not so much the therapy side of things. It's more of the, like all the other things, and adjusting to that was, I mean, it was a little bit of a challenge, but, nothing beats the flexibility behind it too. Like I think absolutely 100% the flexibility that you get with home health is 100% worth like any of the difficulty or the responsibilities that come with it. And I do think, I do think in some ways the responsibility side of it is maybe a little bit more than other settings of therapy. For instance, on a PT side of things, in home health, we have these things called starts of care, which basically act as us admitting a patient into the clinic. So we're not only going out there and treating them and doing an eval, but we're also going over all the paperwork that they need to go over. And when we do a start of care, when we admit a patient into the home health agency, we're also checking their medications, checking drug to drug interactions. And that's something I had never done before. And that's something that's very much like nursing oriented or physician oriented. So, the challenges that come with it, I think, are less about the therapeutic side of things and more about the other stuff, but absolutely worth it. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on about it, but like, I love home health so much because you like, not only you're doing PT, but you're also treating people in their most intimate environment. So, I feel also like the relationships you form are that much more meaningful. Cause you're really seeing people like when they're the most comfortable, when they're at home. So I love it. Worth any challenges it could bring, I think.
That's awesome. And so I know that there's a lot of people that really want to do home health, but they have a hard time finding a position. So obviously in your case, you were able to find a position that was willing to teach and train and do all of that. But I know that there's a lot of therapists out there that want to get the experience, but they can't get the jobs because they don't have previous experience. And how do you get the experience? Because there's a lot of clients that aren't flexible on that. So would you say the main reason you think that is because of the organizational aspect, or do you know why, I guess, it's so hard to get into home health if you haven't had the experience?
I think it's hard to get into home health if you haven't had the experience for exactly the reason that you said. So the current contract that I'm working in, they would only hire somebody with a year's worth of home health experience. I got pretty lucky by finding a contract that was open to new grads. And that's just because when I came, I was the only PT. So I was literally the only PT at this. It was a small business in Alaska that had been started for like 2 years. And they really needed a PT because they had a traveler that was leaving, and they needed somebody. So that was, and I'd heard kind of, different things about home health, but, to me, I thought that's a great way to get my foot in the door. I do think that the jobs in home health might be hard to come by because, just because of all those other intangibles, like, there's a certain way, for instance, when we write our visit sets for our patients, like we have to also keep track of like how they fall into a week with the certification period that we have. And that's something that like I never had to do in the hospital, keeping track of mileage, like all the other things that go into it. I think people are probably just weary of hiring someone because maybe they don't want to go through the training. Maybe they want somebody that can kind of immediately get it and jump right into it. So I think that definitely plays a factor into it.
Okay. Do you have any suggestions for therapists that don't have the experience, that want to get into home health, that maybe could help set them apart or sell their resume or something, like aspects of home health that could help sell them in that area?
I think so. Outside of probably like dropping your best Miss America answers in an interview and just like being
Yeah.
a good employee. Cause essentially that's what,
Yeah.
that's what people are looking at when they're looking to hire you. Like they want to make sure that what they're choosing is going to get the job done. So I think, it would probably be the same things that apply, I think, to like interviewing for any position, but, being really teachable, putting an emphasis
Yeah.
on that, being able to adjust, so whatever you need to highlight that shows that you can be in a new environment. I think that's one thing that travelers have going for them is, we're
Yeah.
in a sense almost supposed to be kind of like a Swiss Army knife. Like we need to be dropped into whatever setting, and be able to hold our own and make it our own. So I think being able to be very teachable, and being able to be adaptable, and if you can highlight that either via the resume or the interview, I think that'll really help you out. As far as anybody getting their foot into the door, I think a really good thing to do is to try to find PRN work. So normally,
That's great.
because home health is so flexible too, I feel like people are more inclined to hire somebody PRN because that's not like a big commitment and it's just help for coverage. So if you can at least like get your foot in the door via PRN and start picking up more and more patients, you might be more marketable to either a contract or a full-time job, but got to start somewhere. And then also, just looking at places that might specifically advertise that they're new grad friendly too, because there are places that do that. You might not get the exact city that you want, or you might not be in the exact spot that situation that you want, but I think just being able to show that you're flexible and adaptable, I think will serve you well.
Flexible and adaptable. It's the name of the travel game, right? That rhymes.
Indeed.
Perfect.
Indeed.
So you obviously started in home health kind of by chance, but it seems like you really enjoy it. So do you feel like home health as a setting overall like is pretty impactful? And do you think it like helps drive good patient outcomes versus, some of the other settings? Okay. Can you tell us about that?
So I always heard in school, like consistently for 3 years, anytime we would talk about settings, like my alma mater, are we allowed to say what school we graduated from?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, Texas Tech, Recum Tech.
Yeah.
So at Texas Tech, I don't believe we even had a clinical that was in home health. And I remember a lot of our professors, kind of said, well, if you want to get into home health, at least they said this about, I believe, both home health and travel. If you want to get into home health, wait a year or do another setting because that's not where skills are developed. And, I really, 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 after being in home health for 2 years, I hate that take because it's really like, if you're just the kind of person that you're going to coast or you're not passionate about getting better, then you're probably going to do that in any setting. Yeah. I think in home health, the opportunities to have mentorship are less. And then you're also with a patient one-on-one. Mm-hmm. So you're not really able to bounce off ideas of other clinicians or see what other people are doing. So in that sense, I think I can understand why people say, home health isn't a place where therapists go to get better or to get better at what they do. But I think that's much more driven by the person as opposed to the setting. So having said that, so that's what I had always heard about home health going into it. Just, hey, home health is not a place where you go to sharpen your skills or become a better therapist. It's easy to coast. It's an easy job, and I just really don't like that take. Outside of the fact that I believe growing as a therapist or getting better at your job, whatever it is you do, all that motivation needs to come intrinsically, it needs to come from you. You need to be motivated to do it. Home health is just amazing. You're with the person in their most familiar environment. in home health, we don't bill for we don't bill for time. So it's per visit. So I have patients that I spend I have patients that are close to being discharged and they got everything down pat. So, I'll spend like 20 minutes with them going over exercises. I have patients that are, really, really, really in a bad spot. So like I'll spend an hour and a half with them. Like I've had visits that have been up to 2 hours just because I needed to get everything done with that patient. And when you are with somebody and they're in their home and they're struggling to move around in their home and they see that somebody's spending like all this time with them in the home, that's very impactful for them too. So I think because they're in a very intimate environment and you're not necessarily on, like, you can spend as much time with them as they need. Like in outpatient clinics, we bill for units and, I believe it's like 7 or 8 minutes at least to bill for one unit. But in home health, it's just visit based. You just have such a ability to form relationships with people because they're at their most comfortable and they're in their most familiar environment. So I feel like you really see the real side of them as opposed to if they're in the hospital or if they're coming to you at a clinic. You're really seeing them and their family. And I believe that that's why this setting, I may be biased, but like I honestly believe you can make the biggest difference in somebody's life in home health, 100%.
I love it. Yeah. That's so great. Do you have any people, like any patients in particular? Obviously, you don't need to say their names or anything, but patients in particular, like success stories that you've had that like were really impactful on you as well?
Definitely. The biggest one that comes to mind is, and this is another thing I love about the home health setting. So the biggest one that comes to mind is, I had a patient who was a below the knee amputee who could not extend his knee fully. So in order to receive a prosthetic, you need to have a certain degree of knee extension, like being able to kick out your knee. And because of the nature of his surgery, because of how short they cut the limb, there's just too much tension on the hamstring and he can't extend his leg out all the way. Like it's too tight. Wow. And so the physician tells him, hey, I'm sorry, you're never going to be able to extend your knee past this range, so I can't give you a prosthetic. The prosthetist basically says the same thing. And, he's like ready to give up. And he's just really, really, really like, obviously, understandably, I mean, he's going through this like while COVID's happening and there's all this stuff occurring. So I reached out to the physician and I reached out to the prosthetist, and I had seen these hands-free crutches that were marketed for like people that are non-weight bearing after a surgery, and basically like it's like it's a crutch that you throw over the front of the thigh, and then it has like a little piece of metal that extends out, so somebody can be upright on 2 feet without putting weight through their foot. So if they had like surgery on their foot, or they can't put any weight through their foot, they can still bear weight through the knee. So I reached out to them and I was like, hey, this patient is really, really, really adamant about being upright, and he really wants to be at least like upright, just from a dignity and self-respect standpoint, like on his own 2 feet. Especially in his house. So do you mind if we use a hands-free crutch? Like, do you think that's a good idea? And so, I helped him find one off of Amazon. Like, he had some friends that had some tools, and they sawed off the back of it, because it was longer than what he needed, because it's designed to hold the entire bottom half of the leg. And so, coming up with that, he's back up. Like it's not a prosthetic, but he's at least able to be up on up and moving about in his home. And, you know, so just that, like being able to come up with a solution like that, you know, and then run it by the physician and run it by the prosthetist, and coming up with something like that, you know, to be able to achieve what this person wants to do, like that's super impactful, and that's really amazing.
Yeah.
You know, I have another person, man, I had a patient, every psych disorder in the world. And she has not left her home in 3 years. And
Oh my
this
gosh.
weekend, she went and saw a movie for the first time.
No
Yeah.
way.
So, you know, and then that's another thing about home health too, is like, I feel like in home health, it's a little bit easier to request continued therapy from the insurance company, because I feel like sometimes the process takes a little bit longer. Like some of these people are just completely homebound and they haven't even been able to leave their home. So in outpatient, a lot of times it's like, hey, you're approved for 12 weeks and that's it. And that happens a lot in outpatient.
Yeah.
So, you know, you might not be able to transition through the full period that you need with somebody, but in home health, you know, don't quote me on this, but I want to say the average span of having a patient in home health is anywhere. I want to say it's like, it can be up to a year. So therapy is usually approved for up to 9-week blocks. But we can request whatever we'd like from the insurance company. And then at the end of that, if we need more, we'll request for that. And then if we get approved, we keep going. So, you know, I had a person who hadn't left the home in 3 years who was like, hey, I really want to see this movie. And I was like, well, you know, it's no super bad, but whatever, like let's get you there. So, just having people like being able to navigate their homes, it's really, really, really fulfilling, because think about it, like your home is supposed to be where you're the most comfortable and where you're the most at peace. And imagine not even being able to move in your own home. So if you can manage to make that work with somebody and you know, help them achieve their goals, like it's very, very rewarding. So those are probably the two biggest ones that come to mind.
That's amazing. I love that. And so much, just because like you said, you're getting the opportunity to spend so much one-on-one time with somebody, and like in their home, which again makes it more intimate, like you said. But I feel like people are probably so much more willing to be open with you and, you know, tell you about some of these things that they probably wouldn't do coming into like a busy outpatient clinic or something where you're seeing, you know, an assistant along with you, things like that. And that's just, I love it.
Without getting too hippy dippy, touchy feely, like I really had a vision like coming into PT school that, you know, I really wanted to not only treat the diagnosis, but really focus on treating the person. And, you know, that's just how I believe healthcare should be in general.
Yeah.
Like, I really believe that we should get to know the people that we treat, because I think, you know, healing comes from the inside, and somebody getting better, it's not just their physical body. Like there's a mental aspect of it, there's an emotional aspect of it, there's a spiritual aspect of it. And, you know, I really feel like the best clinicians in healthcare, not just PTs, are like what separates the good ones from the great ones are the ones that make an impact on people, you know, like that people remember, because, you know, sometimes like you're able to take off your clinical hat and just listen to somebody. And like, I've done that plenty of times too. Like, you know, sometimes, for instance, like I'll go to a patient's home, and if a patient's just having like a breakdown or having a really bad day, sometimes I'll just take off the clinician hat and then just sit and listen to them, because like they need someone to talk to. And it's not like I'm, you know, I can spend like whatever. It's not like an outpatient clinic where I got like Grandma Ethel like coming in 30 minutes, and then I got Grandma Sue and then Grandpa Joe and then like a football player, you know, not just all grandpas, but so you're not, it's a flexible schedule. So because you're able to kind of adjust, I feel like you're really able to be there for people. And home health, more than any other setting I've seen, is like given me the opportunity to sit down with someone if they're really hurting or in a bad spot, and really just like listen to them and be there for them. Because I don't have, like all these appointments back to back to back. So that's another way that I feel like it's really like you can make a huge impact, because you're also able to just be there for somebody as a human being, not just as a healthcare provider. So.
Yeah. So you're going into all these different people's homes, and obviously most of the experiences sound like are positive, which is great. But do you ever feel uncomfortable? Like, is there anybody's house? Because you're driving up and you just have people scheduled. You've never necessarily met them before, but is there any ever situations where you feel uncomfortable, and how do you kind of overcome walking up to the door, going inside, all of that?
Overcoming, walking up and getting into the door. I mean, I guess you just gotta. That's different for everybody. But for me, like I've always, I feel like I've always been pretty friendly and pretty open. So that part is a little bit more natural for me.
Okay.
And that being said, too, 100%. I think home health is different from a man's perspective compared to a woman's. And just because of the fact that, like, there's probably things that as a guy, like, I might not consider or be uncomfortable with that may make a woman uncomfortable. So I think as a man, it's probably a little bit easier or more comfortable to be in the home health setting, because I may not feel, and this is just me personally, like I personally may not feel threatened or uncomfortable in certain situations. That being said, I mean, that has happened. But I think there's a disparity between it. And I have plenty of female friends in home health that, like, I've had that conversation with. The nice thing, so I've had 2 patients in home health that I've just gotten out that situation immediately. Like I've been in there.
Okay. I
was in the home for about 5 minutes and I left. The first was like I was in someone's home, an older patient, female, and they were just really saying like a lot of inappropriate and lewd stuff. So I addressed it like pretty quickly, and I just told her like, hey, let's try to stay professional. Like, can we please just carry on? And so that didn't stop. So I kind of I just got out of there. And then the second time, I was treating somebody with a lot of psych disorders, and they started like really, really, really getting threatening, and just their body language and, how they were presenting themselves. And, so that too, I just, the nice thing about home health, regardless of if you're a man or a woman, and the home health agencies that I've seen, but I think this is across the board, every good home health agency, I'll put it this way, every good home health agency is going to tell you the same thing. They're going to say the second you feel uncomfortable, leave. Like, don't even think about it twice. Don't put yourself in danger. And I believe some companies have specific policies too. So I want to say, I don't know if it's company-wide or industry-wide, but I know at least with both organizations I've been with, like if there is a gun out in the home, like you just leave. Like, and you tell people these things, like, you can't treat them if they have either, paraphernalia, like weapons, anything like that out in the open. And then any situation that would make you uncomfortable. And for the most part, like, it happens with males, it happens with females, but there's always going to be those situations that are, maybe a little bit sketchy, but, just use your best judgment. And if you ever feel uncomfortable, just get out of there. But that being said, most patients, like, you're going to help them and you're going in there to get them stronger to navigate their own home. So most of them are like, you know how many people have baked me cookies? I don't even need to buy cookies because every time I just go to someone's house, they got cookies like right there. And they're just like, hey, I feel way better. I could stand for this amount of time to bake you these cookies. Thank you. So most people are sweet because they want to get better. But that being said, most companies will tell you like, you know, if you feel uncomfortable, just get out of there. And that's great.
I think that's perfect. Yeah, no, especially like having the support of most companies, like you said, saying if you need to go. Because I think some people get nervous about that. But I think, like you said, there's just those one-off situations. And if you need to leave, you can leave. And that's great. Sorry,
everybody's going to have, I think like if you've just been in this setting, like everybody's going to have one story. And so for me, you know, in like the 2 years I've been doing home health, I really only have those two stories of like times I felt uncomfortable. And it's just, it's great because the second you leave, like, you know, I called my boss, told her what happened, and immediately first question, are you okay? Like, how do you feel? Do you need to come in? Do we need to talk about it? You know, do we need to take any other kind of action? So, every good agency and organization is going to be like really is going to have your back. And I think, you know, you do need to be social and like but I don't think you need to be any more social than if you were in an outpatient clinic or in in a hospital, you know, like, I mean, like it might be a little strange to go knock on someone's door and then like go into their home. But you'll have a conversation with them on the phone, like they'll know when you're coming by. So generally, like that aspect of it and like meeting new people, like, and the fact that you can leave if you're uncomfortable, like I generally think it's a very comfortable experience. You know, I think it depends on the person, but that being said, like I don't necessarily think it's easy for me to feel uncomfortable. Like, I don't think I'm like particularly resilient to it. So, I still haven't felt, you know, very off, being in a situation in the 2 years I've been doing it.
So you brought up something a couple times about working for a good company, which is obviously an important thing with any job that you take, but especially in home health, I've heard from a lot of my therapists that that's obviously really important. So is there anything specifically that you look for in a home health contract that maybe would define, you know, a good company or a bad company, or, you know, this is a no-go or this is, you know?
I think as far as looking in a contract for things that speak on the company, I would say basically just like kind of reputation in the community, how long they've been in the community and how long they've been treating patients. Specifically in regards to the contract, you know, whether or not like what their productivity standards are. The industry standard in therapy is 4 to 5 visits a day. There's also a unit system that basically goes off of like different visits are weighted as different units. And so if they have something like really high, that just means that they're kind of focused on you going from place to place and not really taking the time to treat people and get them better. So they might be more focused about bottom line. So I would probably say that would be the thing that stands out the most. Like if you are looking at a contract and the company has this expectation that like you need to see, like I've heard horror stories of therapists that have had home health contracts that ask them to do at least 30 visits a week, which is a lot. Like that's a lot in home health. You know, that's at least six a day. And so if you're doing that between like the driving and between the notes and just being able to deliver quality care. And sometimes like you never know when someone's having a bad day, or you never know when someone needs you to kind of slow down and sit with them and talk with them before you can continue with therapy. You know, I think things like that, like what sorts of pressure are they putting on the therapist to get the job done? I would say probably stands out the most.
Okay. Well,
and then another thing too that I really like is, you know, in this contract that I interviewed for,
Yeah.
you know, I kind of asked about what sorts of things do they do differently, or like, are they open to people bringing in? So, for instance, like in home health, you know, I think using e-stim is great. Like using electrotherapy is awesome, but not a lot of home health agencies I've seen or I've interviewed for, they don't do that regularly. And so just being able to say like, well, you know, I use e-stim for these diagnoses, or I think it's very effective in this patient population. Like, do you mind if I use that? Like if they give you also space to create, I think that's another huge thing. The example of the patient I was working with, who we kind of turned the up walker into not quite a prosthetic, but something that he could be up on his feet with too. Ran that idea by my boss. And while she did say, she was like, that's a little spacey. That's some pretty out the box thinking, but sure, if it works, like go ahead with it. You know, if they let you be creative and they let you kind of explore therapy in a way that is clinically sound and that makes sense but helps people get better, that's another big thing too, because for me, like I always want to try to push the envelope of what I know or what I can do. And so being with an organization that isn't just like, okay, well, go to this person's house, focus on stairs this one day, then focus on transfers this day, then, you know, but letting me have the space to kind of explore what I think might work treatment-wise, that's definitely a big thing. So I would say not having really hot, like not having insane visit standards and letting you actually treat the person, and then also letting you get creative. I would think those are the two things that make an organization like stand out and be something solid to work for.
Amazing. This is awesome. I'm so glad you came on.
Me too.
All the Alaska stuff, home health, people are going to love it.
I've been telling everybody, home health is so slept on. Like, and you know what? I hope people continue to not get into home health so I can do all the home health everywhere. Like, you guys keep sleeping on home health because trust me, it's great. Really. So, I wouldn't, you know, I would never try to sell anybody on like a position or anything like that. And I have no reason to, but, it's really, since I got into it, like, you know, and I've done like pretty much everything. Like, started in inpatient neuro, did skilled nursing, did home health, did outpatient. I've had a rotation in pediatrics. And then in school, like I also did like an acute care and ICU rotation. And out of all the settings, like I just, you know, I like it the most because I feel like it's where you can make the biggest difference. But, you know, maybe we should stop the podcast right here because I don't want people, you know, discovering how great it is. And, you know,
well, we'll do that then. Thank you so much, Eric. This has been so great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, we can keep, you know, I got probably another 30 minutes that I could talk about home health, but definitely.
We'll have to do it again next time.
Sure.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
All right, see ya.
Bye. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in to I Need Travel Therapy. To learn more about today's episode, make sure to explore the show notes at medtravelers.com/I Need Travel Therapy. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a guest. If you're a therapist interested in traveling, visit medtravelers.com to explore nationwide travel therapy job offerings and to learn about the amazing benefits that MedTravelers has to offer. Also, a very special thanks to producer Jonathan Carey, assistant producers Katie Schraben and Sam McKay, and Aiden Dykes for the music and editing. See you next time, Travel Fam.